is to really the gentleman who started it all for me, Al Berkeley, who has been active in the data interoperability scene for 1 or 2 weeks. Al, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and what you're doing on the big screen to help transition to digital.
Yeah, well, a little bit of history. I don't want to bore people, but the issue of making machine readable data available to the public for publicly traded companies is how I got involved in this. I was president of the NASDAQ in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and the SEC was interested in getting away from PDFs and helping people really do analysis with the data that was in the huge database called Edgar. And so we wanted to create a standard setting body that would allow people to have confidence that their definition of data would be accepted and that the government would in fact accept that data. So we set up a nonprofit called XBRL-US, Extensible Business Reporting Language is what XBRL stands for. And we began working what we thought was a 3-year project. It's been almost 20 years, but we've got a lot of progress and things are happening in a significant way, even in the footnotes of public companies. The interesting piece to me is what I've learned internationally. I happen to have been on the board of the World Economic Forum for about 11 years, and I watched other countries move ahead quickly with data standardization and defined vocabularies. And they're getting the same kind of efficiency out of it that you and I get out of a railroad gauge, track gauge that's standard, or an electric plug for 110 or a bigger voltage appliance. We don't have to worry about that standardization. We don't even think about it, and we get enormous efficiencies out of it. The United States is getting itself into a position in data that's very similar to the position we're in measurements. We're still using inches and pounds when the rest of the world is using meters and centimeters and kilograms, et cetera. We are so far behind, we don't even know what we don't know, and the inefficiencies that these lack of defined data fields is causing us. Now, I know I'm singing to the choir here, but we've got a larger audience beyond just what shows up on the screen. And I'd like to just grab people by the scruff of the neck and say, we have to be competitive in a world market. We cannot bear a 10, 20% inefficiency ratio because we don't have standard data between ourselves. So I'm real interested in this as a national feature. And I worked with Darrell Issa, whom Dixon mentioned a minute ago, was a congressman from California. He was chairman of Government Operations Committee. He was the House sponsor for the Data Act. He was the partner with Mark Warner, who's a Democratic senator, who also sponsored the Data Act. And even though it was just a very small toe in the water for the federal government, it gave us a platform to work from. We need to understand how competitively this is impacting us, and we need to understand that we can, in fact, change things. I am delighted to have spent almost 20 years on this head-banging process because it's actually happening. In this panel today, we've got pieces of the puzzle that fit together, and we're just about to start that flywheel running that'll be more and more efficient. Let me stop here. Dixon, is there anything I didn't cover that you wanted me to cover?
No, but thank you for bringing up the World Economic Forum. COVID-19, we know is impacting all of our lives and is creating quite a disruption. The question is how can we take advantage of this crisis to create something positive? The World Economic Forum has put out a quest called the Great Reset. And our collaboration group has submitted a proposal that the legacy problems of fragmented, just like Peter talked earlier, fragmented systems and inability to communicate. The Great Reset is a simple way for all of our people to communicate effectively. And so we're submitting to the World Economic Forum, and hopefully we can help continue this outreach and bring more people along to influence them toward open standards. But
Dixon, I might add to what Charlie just said, if you're there. I don't know if anybody see me?
Yeah, I can see you, and we lost Dixon, I think. So go ahead.
I think we did. So let me just jump in there for a minute, because what you need to understand, because the SEC requires every public company to report in a defined language, the beauty of XBRL is it carries, with the data, it carries a definition of what the data is and where it came from. And it's magic in terms of moving data around and programming and not having to coordinate. People don't have to coordinate with each other because the data does the coordination for them. And you've got every public company in the United States, every public company in the European market, all the Japanese companies, all the Singaporean companies, many of the Indian companies, and most of the Chinese companies, all using these formats. And we just need to be sure we're not left behind.
Yep.
Another slide there that might help, Jan, which is this is the concept that something that makes is an added expense initially, and then as it gets more and more important, it becomes a competitive advantage. And you see concentration take place in an industry because people have used the competitive advantage to get both more efficient and more effective. So from my point of view, we had a lot of politics involved in getting XBRL started, and we actually had to have the force of a regulator make it happen. But once it happened, we began to see this proliferation of people because information's power, and a lot of people didn't want the information out there and didn't want it to be comparable. So you had a whole 10-year period where naysayers were trying to be sure that it didn't work. But eventually it became a competitive advantage, and now people can't operate effectively without it. I'd like to re-emphasize how important it is in the financial world, and pick up on some of Arun's comments, that if you give the data more accurately and more quickly in a standardized format, you reduce risk. It's like the difference between a credit card and a debit card. The debit card fees are cheaper because the risk evaporates. It's not a promise to pay from somebody in 30 days. It's an instant payment. So that model, that analogy is really powerful and will reduce the risk in investing in solar, for example, and make the pool of money available much, much larger.